Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2023 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited, we're going to be showing you how to install the REDARC Tow-Pro Elite Trailer Brake Controller. And we're going to be doing that in conjunction with the etrailer.com Universal Brake Controller Install Kit, as well as the Roadmaster Custom Fit Stoplight Switch. But before we get into all that, let's just take a minute, check this out, and make sure it's going to work for you. People who have Jeeps tend to do a ton of different things with them. You know, they're really capable vehicles, and because of that, people pull trailers around. And if your trailer happens to have brakes on it, you're going to need a way to apply those brakes. That way you can slow down safely and have that braking experience be a lot more predictable. And that's exactly where a trailer brake controller like the REDARC is going to come into play. And there's a ton of brake controllers out there available. These REDARCs are super popular, and I can see why. We do a ton of them here, and they just flat out work like you'd expect them to, and they look awesome as well. So this is the only thing you're going to be able to see is this little knob here. The rest of the brake controller, the body and brains of it, if you will, is up underneath the dash out of sight. And so you have a lot of different options in terms of where you want to mount this thing. You know, you can get pretty creative. You don't need a ton of room to mount this thing up. So we just did ours down here where it's kind of out of the way, easy to see, pretty easy to get to. You know, and that sure beats the traditional style brake controllers. That's at least what I call them. So right here I have a Prodigy P3, and there's nothing wrong at all with these. You know, they work great and everything. But you just have this big old box set you'll have to deal with kind of getting in your way. And these Jeeps aren't the biggest vehicles inside to begin with. So having this here could really get annoying. And, you know, you're just really limited on where you're actually able to put something like this. With the REDARC Tow-Pro Elite, definitely one of the more premier style trailer brake controllers out there, at least in my opinion. Can do a lot of cool stuff with it. It'll work with trailers that have up to 3 axles, so more than enough for what the Jeep is definitely likely to be able to pull around, so all good there. And it'll work with trailers that have electric brakes, so it's pretty typical. You know, for the most part, that's what you're going to see out there. And but it also has the ability to work with electric over hydraulic brakes if your trailer happens to be set up that way. This is going to be a proportional style brake controller, and you can also enter a user control mode, which we'll get to in a minute, but most of the time a lot of people are going to use it in the proportional mode. And so what happens when you use that, however hard you apply the brake in your Jeep, essentially the trailer is going to match that, right? So it's just a little more predictable. Almost stop as one whole cohesive unit, right? It just tends to be a little bit smoother. So to kind of give you an example, that let's say if you're just rolling up to a stop sign, got your foot halfway on the brake, trailer's going to respond the same way. On the other hand, if you slam that brake on, maybe you're on the highway, there's an accident up ahead or something, trailer's going to match that essentially. So just makes for a more comfortable braking experience. The knob is how you're going to make adjustments. So you have 0, you can roll it all the way up to 10. And what that's going to change is the braking force. So essentially you can kind of dial that in depending on your trailer load, right? So maybe if you're going to pick something up and the trailer's empty, you don't really need a whole lot of help from the trailer brakes, right? So you might be able to get away with a 2 or 3 or something. On the other hand, let's say if you get the load and it's heavy, and you just don't feel like you're having enough help from the trailer brakes, you can always dial that up, you know, maybe to 6, 7, or 8, something along those lines. So you can really fine tune it, even on the types of roads, you know, maybe you're going up and down big hills, something like that. Kind of dial that in and find what braking force number works the best for you. And the manual override, if you're not familiar with that, or how it works, essentially if you want to do that, you just push down on the button, and that's going to apply just the trailer's brakes. And so generally you'd use that in the event of a sway. If the trailer kind of starts getting away from you a little bit, you can push this button down, and even better if you can kind of roll up the power on it. That's going to get it back under control and get it straight behind you again. Something that's pretty neat too that's built into this, it has a park brake feature. And so more or less what that means, let's say if you're at a red light, you know, just sitting there, after a few seconds, this will determine if the trailer brakes even need to be applied, or, you know, apply it at a lower rate than what you're pushing down on the brake pedal here in the Jeep. And, you know, that just prevents unnecessary wear and tear on your trailer's brakes. If it don't need to be applying the brakes to hold it still, why bother, right? And so this does that automatically for you, so it might save, you know, get a few more miles, a little more life out of your trailer's brakes. And I mentioned that user control mode earlier, all right? And to enter it in that mode, you want to rotate your knob fully counterclockwise, push down on the brake, and then push the button in twice real quick, let off the brake, and you can see it went green. Now we are in user control mode. And you know, a lot of people aren't going to use this, but what it's for is you're going to essentially have complete control. So let's say if you have this set at like a 5, regardless of how hard you hit the brake in the Jeep, it's going to send that output back to your trailer's brakes. So you could barely be on the brake or be stomping on it, and it's going to do the same thing every time. So it kind of tends to be popular with people who do a lot of overlanding, some, you know, off-roading, trying to get their trailer or whatever back in the woods or what have you. You know, you can kind of fine-tune that and make it a little bit safer, or you know, just have more control over what the trailer's brakes are doing while you're off-road. Another good option for those of you out there that are kind of looking for something that's a little more simplified, if you will, but still has a really good appearance that the Tow-Pro Elite, like this one here, has. REDARC makes another one. It's called the Tow-Pro Liberty. Like I said, essentially a simplified version of this. You don't get some of the features that this one has, but you know, it still maintains the reliability that this offers and the good looks as well. So might be worth looking into there. But other than that, at the end of the day, I think it's an awesome fit for the Jeep. You know, looks good and definitely isn't going to let you down. It'll work in just about any situation you find yourself in. As far as the installation goes, you know, the difficulty level, I could say, could be pretty easy or really time consuming. It kind of just depends on how your Jeep is set up. So for those of you that have a factory tow package, meaning you already have a 7-way trailer connector on your Jeep from the factory, if yours is set up like that, chances are really good you can utilize the tow package plug, which is a connector up under the dash, and it's kind of plug and play. A lot of the Jeeps aren't going to have that though. Ours didn't. And if that's your scenario, you're going to need a few things to kind of make this whole package work. You'll need existing 4-way flat wiring. We use the Takancha kit, worked great. You also need the universal brake controller install kit that we make here at eTrailer to, you know, provide you with all the wires and stuff that you'll need for the brake controller. And with these Jeeps too, since a brake controller requires you to have a brake signal, meaning whenever you hit the brake in your Jeep, it has to tell the brake controller that. These Jeeps, you can't use the factory wires to do that. So you also have to use a stoplight switch kit. We use the one by Roadmaster, and everything went together pretty good, actually. You know, didn't really come into any issues or communication errors or anything like that. So pretty straightforward, time consuming though. So stay focused. Got a lot of wires to run. Thankfully, the Jeep's pretty open, and you should be in pretty good shape. But something you're doing yourself, hang around. We'll go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation, the first thing that I like to do is kind of prep our wiring connector here. So really just this end. You're gonna have some wires that come off of it, and you're gonna have another wire. It'll be yellow. We're not gonna use the yellow one because that's for a reverse circuit. It's not necessary for our application. So I just took that and just taped it up out of the way it's there if we ever do need it for whatever reason. But the 4-way flat connector here, I'm gonna cut that cap off. And then these ends, these butt connectors, they're pre-attached. They'll work just fine. If you use these, make sure you just tape them up real good at the end. But what I like to do is upgrade to these heat shrink style, because the ends will seal up and help protect against corrosion a little bit better. So the way you make any electrical connection, whether it be a butt connector or ring terminals like this, you strip the bare end of the wire back, and then you give that wire a good twist. Put the connector over the end of it and crimp it down. So do that same thing for this end here. We'll mount up our 7-way to our bracket, and so you have 4 corners of it. Get bolts. Just take a bolt, push it through, and where it comes out there, put on a flat washer, a split lock washer, and a nut. And I like to get all 4 corners started hand tight, and then just come back and snug all of them down. In order to mount everything up here, I use what's called a no drill long bracket, which you will have to get separately. And I just feel better about mounting this to that as opposed to just right on the crossbeam there, because our exhaust is so close. I want to keep this away from heat as best I can. So you can always grab this bracket here at eTrailer, and I'll get our bolts to drop through and tighten it down. What we're able to do now, you can take your existing 4-pole wiring, which is this here. I'm going to get rid of that cap, and I do suggest taking some dielectric grease and just putting it on the terminals. This will help prevent corrosion down the road. So put that on, and then this will just plug right on in. So I made a semi-permanent connection here. Once I plug these in, just wrap some electrical tape around it, and then a zip tie. That way it won't come apart over time. And what we're able to do is focus on our duplex wiring here. So you get a big bundle of this, and I just kind of routed it right from the back over to here. We'll take one end of it. This is going to get connected to our 7-way, but we need to separate the wires inside. There's 2 wires inside of here, so very carefully take a utility knife or a blade and cut down the center of it. Be real careful when you're doing this. Like I said, it's easy to slip. And peel off about that much, probably, something like that. And I'm going to strip both of these ends back here. These are going to connect to our 7-way. So you got the black wire. That'll go to the black wire from our 7-way. Crimp that down real good. And then the blue wire from our 7-way, we're going to hook up to the white duplex wire. Like that. And since I'm using these heat shrinks, I'm going to come back with a heat gun and seal up the ends. With those connections made, as well as any of the other ones that we do like this, it just might be it, honestly. Either way, I'm coming back with electrical tape, wrapping everything up just to provide us with an extra layer of protection here. For the white wire, that's going to be a ground, and it has this pre-attached ring terminal. What you can do, this metal crossbar here, you can take the included self-tapping screw and run it up through there. What I'm going to do though, is there's actually a threaded nut right in there. And I actually had a bolt laying around. It's a M10 by 1.25 thread pitch. And so I'm just going to use that. That way we don't have to drill a hole. Problem is though, that bolt's too big to fit through our ring terminal. So I have another larger one here that I'll crimp on, and that way we can ground this. Either way, you know, this has to just get mounted to, you know, a clean piece of metal that will provide us with a good ground. Regardless on what way you do it here, I just happen to have the extra bits and pieces laying around, so that's why I'm doing it this way. At this point, you know, I just do some zip ties and kind of secured everything up nice and tight. You know, trying my best to stay away from the muffler there. But that duplex wiring, that big bundle, we need to route that up towards the front. And so what I did, it's kind of tricky to see from time to time, but I ran it essentially on top of our brace there, zip tying it along the way where it's going to kind of run over and run on top of our frame. You kind of see a little piece of it there. And, you know, avoid moving parts and everything like that too. So use some of the zip ties every now and again. But it's just going to continue essentially on top of our frame and get routed all the way down through here. So it's kind of tight for sure, but you can slide everything through and get it pulled tight, especially once you come to about this area where it's wide open. So from the back there, you know, I push that wire forward, you're able to grab it, pull it tight, get your hand up there, get a zip tie or two in place. So that's where it goes. And then it runs right up into the engine compartment. It's usually pretty wide open. This wire is pretty stiff. You can usually push it up there. If you can't though, you can always take a fish wire, for example, a piece of tubing or a metal coat hanger if you straighten it out. Drop it from the top down, and then you can tape your wire onto it down here and then pull it right up into position. Now in the engine compartment, here's where our duplex wire came up. Kind of zip tied it up and out of the way. And then if you remember how we removed that sheathing from the back by taking a utility knife and kind of separating it all, I did that for the whole remaining portion of our wiring here. I mounted up our circuit breakers, and you don't have to do it this way. You can just self-tap, you know, using these self-tapping screws and secure them to the side of your vehicle. Just try to get close to the battery, but honestly, there's not a ton of room here. And so I just built a little bracket out of this piece of metal, just flat, and then has a 90-degree bend in it. And this factory bolt, I just pulled that out, ran it through the bracket, tightened it down. This gives us a perfect spot for our breakers. So I secured them down using our self-tappers. That's really all there is to it. Now, as far as what breakers to use, all the applications are going to use the 40 amp breaker, and that'll be for our 12-volt auxiliary power at the back of our 7-way. And then just check your brake controller's instructions. Some of them want 20, some want 30, some just depend on what you're going to be doing with it, so on and so forth. In our case, with our Redarc, I have the 30 amp circuit breaker, and so that's the one that I used. You can grab your black wire that we ran up into the engine compartment and just route this right over to our circuit breakers, and this is going to get connected to the silver post on our 40 amp breaker. So just cut it to length. You want to hold on to that piece of wire that's extra as well that we just cut off. But with these, all of them that are going to go to our breakers, take one of these small ring terminals that come in the kit. Crimp that on real good. And when you go to take these off as well, be careful because they're easy to drop for whatever reason, and then you can't hardly ever find them again. So at least if that happens, you got one that you can borrow from since you have an extra breaker in the kit. But slide that over the silver post. We'll run that nut back down. Then use a 3/8 socket to snug it. And you just want to get it snug. You don't have to crank down on these by any means. So what I've done now with some of that extra black wire that we had cut off, I took a piece of it, crimped on a small ring terminal, and I did this for both breakers here. So I have 2 pieces of wire, small ring terminals. Those are going to get attached to the bronze colored posts labeled battery. It's probably hard to see, but it says battery on the breaker. And tighten those down. And those are actually going to run over this way to where our positive battery post is. And on those ends, I crimped on the little bit bigger ring terminals. And eventually these are going to get hooked up to this post here, but I'm going to wait towards the very end to do that. That way we don't have live hot wires while we're trying to work with everything and get stuff routed. With that remaining portion of our black wire, I crimped on a small ring terminal and put it on the silver post on our 30 amp breaker. And at this point, we're going to need to find a way to get not only this black wire, but our white wire routed inside of our Jeep over by the driver's side dashboard area. Just for a reference for a lot of you at home, there's a really easy to use grommet on Jeeps that have an automatic transmission. Over on the driver's side, kind of tucked in the corner on the automatics, which the majority of them are now, there will be a grommet, maybe about the size of a $50, and you can poke a hole in that and feed your wires right in through there. It's wide open under the dash. So that's what I'd recommend if you have the automatic, route that black and white wire over here and do it that way. In our case, we have a standard transmission, so it's a stick shift, and all that stuff is being utilized. So we'll find another way in, not a big deal, but I just wanted to touch base on this part here for those of you that have that automatic transmission. So I got our white wire and our black wire routed inside of our Jeep, and that would be a good point too if you're going to be installing a stoplight switch. That way we can pick up a brake signal, which that's what we're doing. That'd be a good point too to run that power wire. That's what this little skinny black one is here. But essentially, I just routed them loosely over through this little opening, and I'll come back when this is done and tuck everything in and zip tie it up nice. But I got it going all the way over to the driver's side there. Once you make it over to the corner over here on the driver's side, being that we couldn't use that grommet that we talked about earlier, about a foot or so below it, I actually just drilled a hole and used a bushing or a grommet, put it in the firewall and ran our wires in through the vehicle that way. On the inside, underneath the dash, here's just another look at where I was able to drill a hole and use that grommet and push our wiring through. You can remove this kick panel now over on the driver's side. And I've done that. It's just you can't really see much inside of here when I'm working. So, but this essentially just unsnaps, you know, just pops out from the plastic, and there will be one nut right there that you can remove with a 10 millimeter, and then essentially this just pops out of the way. Now that we have our brake controller install kit wiring inside here, I stripped the ends back and crimped on some butt connectors. Then we can take our REDARC brake controller plug, the universal plug there, and start to get that hooked up. So the black wire from it will get connected. Just shorten these leads up a little bit. We'll get connected to the black wire from our brake controller install kit. So that's the power. And then the blue wire is going to be our brake output. So we'll hook that up to the white wire from our brake controller install kit. The white wire coming from your REDARC brake controller plug, that's going to be a ground, and so I just crimped on a ring terminal to it. Not going to worry about hooking that up just yet. We'll do that in a minute. And then you're going to have a red wire, and that's going to need to get connected to the cold side of your brake light switch. And since these Jeeps don't have a factory wire that we can use, that is if you don't have the factory tow package like the majority of them out there, that's going to require us to install what's called a stoplight switch. So now would be a great time to get that done. To get the stoplight switch in place, makes it much easier to remove this center panel underneath the steering wheel. This gives you a lot more room to work. And with it, essentially it's just held in with plastic fasteners, and so you can just simply pull on it and get it removed. We'll get this out of our way. You can grab your stoplight switch, and I like to kind of prep it as much as possible. So strip the insulation back on each end of the wire there. On one end, I crimped on the green wire. Doesn't matter which color wire goes where, as long as you got them both hooked up. And then kits that come with a red wire as well. And I twist up the end here. We'll grab the butt connectors that they give us and hook this one up too. I notice with the wires coming out of the switch, they're a little on the thin side, so I strip them back long and kind of double them over like that. Get both of them crimped down. Not bad either, just so you don't have a bunch of loose wires, because once you're up under the dash, everything becomes more difficult, just to kind of bundle them together a little bit, and makes it a little more manageable when you're hooking everything up. You can grab the bracket, and one end of it's going to have notches in it. That's going to be the end that will bolt up underneath the dash here in a moment. But this side, what you can do, take one of the nuts and the star washers off the switch, put the switch through the bracket, put the star washer on, and the nut back on, and that's how you're going to actually be able to adjust this, right? So it'll go forward and back, and what we're looking to accomplish is this little plunger here. All right, say if my finger is a brake pedal arm, when the brake pedal's just sitting there, you're not pushing on it or anything, you want that plunger to essentially be almost pushed in completely. All right, and then that way, you know, say, like I said, my finger's brake pedal arm, when you start to push down on the brake, that plunger comes out, and when that happens, that completes the connection in the switch here and lets power go through. All right, and that's going to be our brake signal. And so when you set this up, because it's, like I said, hard to see under the dash, you can take, I believe this is a 17 millimeter and a 14 millimeter size, but you can make those adjustments to get that plunger to sit how you need it to there. So I just kind of start in the middle here and get it hand tight and go from there. So underneath the dash, right to the left of the steering column, essentially, there's going to be a nut there, and that's what we can remove and slide the other end of our bracket on and tighten back down. I marked it with an arrow to indicate that, and I believe it's a 13 millimeter head. So I'll go ahead and pull that off and set our bracket up and then show you what it looks like once I'm done here. I got our switch mounted up there, and this is how it turned out once it's all bolted down. Moving back underneath the hood, if you remember, when we routed these wires, we had an extra black one that we ran as well, and we can get our fuse holder hooked up. Okay, so this comes in the kit, butt connector, ring terminal on one end there, and then we can set it up and get it hooked up to battery power. Got a number of terminals to choose from. I just use this one, so I remove the nut with a 10 millimeter socket, put the ring terminal over the stud, and then just tighten the nut back down. Back inside under the dash now, I took our power wire that we ran inside here, hooked that up to the red wire from our switch, our stoplight switch, and then the green wire from our stoplight switch, I hooked that up to the red wire from our brake controller adapter plug. And so this is going to be our brake signal there. The last remaining wire here is the white one, and like I said, that was a ground, and so it turns out there's a bunch of ground posts here from the factory, and so I just utilized one of those, pulled the nut off with a 10 millimeter, ring terminal over, tighten it back down. We want to come back under the hood now, take our fuse for our stoplight switch, and put that in place. That way we can make sure the signal is proper before we get carried away, mounting up a bunch of other stuff under the dash, getting in our way there. To make sure you have the switch set up properly as far as it being adjusted, you can use a test light and hook it up to, the wire that power is going to be sent out. In our case, this red wire here. So with that, I got the other end of our test light grounded, and what we're looking for is when this brake pedal just starts to get pushed down, you want that light to illuminate. So that's about perfect. You want a little bit of give in there, but I could feel just the brake pedal getting pressure, and once I get to that point, that light is illuminated, and that's how we're set up. If you got to push it way down here, you need to adjust the switch. If the light's always on before you even push it, you need to push the switch in more and find that sweet spot. We can get our unit mounted up now, and with these you can put them pretty much anywhere. Just don't zip tie them to stuff that can move around like a bundle of wiring or anything. And what I did, which might be a little overkill actually, but ain't gonna hurt, is I took a bracket that I had laying around, and this is actually a 6-way round style of bracket, and just flattened it out and use screws to secure it to the top there. And this is just plastic, don't get carried away. If you do it like this, get carried away cranking down on these screws, you'll probably crack the plastic. But my thought is, this beam that runs across here, it's open in the back there towards the middle. I think I'm going to use some more screws to secure it like that. All right, but before I do that, I'm almost tempted to get the wires plugged in. That way we don't have to kind of bend our hand up there funny and try to get everything plugged in there. You're gonna have 2 wires to plug in. So this one will go into one side of the controller. Then you're gonna have another bundle. Take the end that matches here and plug that in. And then I'm going to get a couple more screws, secure that down like we talked about, and I'll show you how it turned out. Here's how this turned out. And when you are drilling through here, the middle's pretty open, but there are some wires that run back through here, so just be conscious of that. You don't want to drill into them and damage them. So at this point, I was able to just kind of tuck some of her wiring up back under the dash, zip tie it away from moving parts and things like that. Snap the kick panel back on the opposite way that we removed it, this plastic piece. And this wire coming out of our brake controller, it's actually going to get plugged into the control switch, which brings me to my next point. We're going to need to find a good spot to mount this up. So to determine, we're going to put our knob on that front panel that we removed underneath the steering wheel. And there's quite a bit of stuff going on back there. Just make sure you eyeball it, and it's going to clear everything. And so I just put a little dot where I want the center to be. And they give you this little sticker essentially. I'm just going to center that up and then just use that as a template here. We have something to go off of so we can get that drilled out. I'm first going to start with the small pilot bit. Drill that out. And we can move up to the final size, which is a 25/64. It's kind of an odd size bit. Essentially, this is just one step up from a 3/8. Kind of give you something to work with there, but we'll get it completely drilled out here. So I got that hole drilled. I kind of wiped the surface clean with some alcohol and let it dry. And that sticker that they give you, if you kind of hold this up, not a bad idea either too if you hold it up on the dash. Take that sticker, line it up with the hole, and you want that little nipple there to be in the 12 o'clock position. So that's how I got it set up. And then you can take your switch here and coming from the back there, then you'll have this plastic nut, and you want to get this started and take your time at this. They're super easy to strip out, you know, it's just plastic, so make sure it's started. Once you're confident it's started and on there straight, you could take a 12mm socket and just do this by hand. Don't use a tool, actually, you know, a ratchet or anything, and just snug that up a little bit. Make sure it's secure. And then the actual dial portion there, rotate that all the way counterclockwise. And then you can take your knob, and with the 0, you're going to put that on to where it's going to be in the 12 o'clock position. And that just kind of snaps into place there. Moving back inside the vehicle, you can now take this part and plug it into the back of our switch. I'll go ahead and kind of bundle this wire up and push our panel back into place. Now that everything is all hooked up, we can come back under the hood to our battery, remove that nut there, and take our ring terminals from our circuit breakers and put them to power. So back inside now, I'm not hooked up to a trailer or anything, but if I push on our knob, we see it's illuminating blue. So we know we got power and everything like that. And at this point, what you'd want to do is calibrate your brake controller. Of course, once you get everything wrapped back up, get the hood closed and whatnot. And the way that I suggest doing it is just driving around like normal and just make a series of braking sequences just like you normally would. And it usually don't take too long to calibrate these things. Usually about 10, 20 stops, if that. And what'll happen whenever you hook up to your trailer, this will be a solid color, and then you know it'll be in good shape. You can do it hooked up to a trailer too, and that way you can visually watch the colors of the knob change and everything. But my thought is, it's, you know, unless you got a wide open area to do that, you probably want to get this sorted and calibrated before you're hauling a trailer around on the public roads and things like that, just to be on the safe side and make sure everything works. So entirely up to you how you want to do that, but either way, it's something that needs to get done. Once you're calibrated, we can plug into a tester and make sure all of our lights and everything else works. You can use your trailer to do this, but keep in mind, if your trailer has any issues, it might mislead you into thinking it's something you did on the vehicle side. We'll check the functions here. So we'll try our left turn, our right turn, our running lights, our brake lights. And when I'm pushing on the brake controller is indeed sending output or power back here, so we know that's good. And in the top right-hand corner of our box, we have our 12-volt auxiliary power, so we know we're good there. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the REDARC Tow-Pro Elite Trailer Brake Controller on our 2023 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited.